Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Decryption and I hope you are well. In the last tutorial we looked at how to make this quest board where you can walk up to it, you see multiple bits of pieces of paper on it and you can pick up the quests individually. However, some quest boards in other games like The Witcher don't work this way, and instead you'll walk up and you'll activate it and it'll show an overlay for the notice board where you can click on the quest to accept them, maybe even view some details, something like that. So in this tutorial we're going to continue on from our previous quest board, but we're going to turn it into a quest board with a UI, just like the Witcher one, if you want to go down that route. We're going to keep it nice and basic where you simply click it to accept the quest, but you could easily adapt this to show the quest details, some custom dialogue or anything like that. So let's get started. So to get started with the UI, we basically need another type of quest board that we'll make a child of and we'll go from there, which is fine. But we actually need the UI that we're going to show on the screen to take over it. And there's two types of UI that you can technically do. There's the Borderlands style one where you walk up to it, a little graph appears at the side, you still have control over your character. And then there's the Witcher style where you click on the board, it takes over your character, you get a big full screen interface kind. We're going to do the big screen full interface for now. And if you did want to do the Borderlands style one, just render your widget in 3D and don't take over your character pretty much. So where do we start? So the first thing I want to do is come to my UI down here and I'm going to right click, I'll do user interface and I'll do widget blueprint. I'll do user interface and I will call it WB_quest board UI and I'll open this up. So the first thing we want to do is just come in and add a canvas panel. So that's going to take over the screen like so. And then I'll add in an image panel which will be the backing of our canvas. Now I don't actually have any images we can use for this. So all I'm going to do is very poorly taken a screenshot of our tabletop and just reuse that. But if you have better UI, it'll look far. But the functionality wise, it will be there. I'm just going to zoom up real close like that. And then in the console command, I will type high res shot and I'll do space1 to take it at full native resolution. There we go. I'm just going to open it up in my editor of choice. So I'll just use Critter in this point. And then I'm basically just going to come and crop out everything around it. So it just looks like a nice notice board if you wish. And like I say, if you have better artist assets and stuff, it'll look much better. There we go. So that'll be my notice board. I'll basically render that on top. I can put my text on it like that. We'll make it work. I'll come into my content folder, UI, I'll just paste it here. So I'll keep it as a JPEG because it's not got any transparency on it, so that's fine. And I'll call it quest board backing. There we go. And now if I come back into my widget quest board here, I can come to this image and I can come and set the image to our quest board backing. So in the UI, quest board backing out. Let's stretch it to full screen like so. I'm not going to keep it full screen, so what I'm actually going to do is give it a bunch of offset by 100 in each way just so you can see a little bit of the surroundings. I'm going to go 150, 150, 150. So there's our little board. I will add background blur to it. At this point it's just artistic stuff, just trying to make it look a little bit better. I'll make this background blur full screen, but then I'll set the blur strength up to say 5, maybe 3. So you can see it's blurred out the grid just a little bit, but it will be enough just to make it stand out. So now we want to put a place where we can actually render quests to do. I'm going to cut this background image and I'm actually going to come and add an overlay into it, and I'm going to put this overlay where I wanted the image to be. So I'll center align it, I'll full screen align it, but then I'll set the dimensions like so. I'll paste my image inside of it and then set the image to full screen like so. And the reason we're doing this is now we can come in, we can add in another overlay inside of it, and then the overlay can now sit full screen on top of the image and it will always stay the same size as the image. But what I am going to do is just make it left aligned horizontally, and this overlay here is where we're going to actually render all the buttons for us to be able to click on the different quests. So let's rename some bits here. So this image I'll call IMG board backing, and then you can randomize this if you want when you open it in future. This overlay I'll call OL_quest buttons, and then the overlay will just be new. But I will click the OL quest buttons and I'll make sure it's ticked as a variable because that's where we'll spawn it. Now we actually need the button we're going to spawn every time we have a quest. So I'm going to come back to my UI folder. I'm going to right click user interface and I will do widget blueprint. I'll do user widget and I will do WB_quest board button. So in here I will just add a regular button, but then we're going to flesh it out and change it. So depending on how you want the quest to render, it can be massively up to you. All I'm going to do is add an image as a background. I'm going to add an overlay inside of the button. I'll add an image inside of it which will act as a background for us, so I'll just set that to full screen and remove all the padding. And the overlay I will do the same, set it to full screen and remove padding. But actually on the button I will come in and I will remove the draw as for all of them like so, because we don't want them to actually change the color that way. And then on the image, this is where you can put a texture of paper or some whatever you've got. At the moment, I'm going to keep it as white because that's what I've got on the actual quest board, but feel free to drop your texture on there. You could also put text info on here if you want, stuff like that. But now I'm just going to keep it as white, and I'll hit compile and save. And now when we come back to our quest board UI, we should be able to find our quest board button. And you can see as we drag it into the overlay here, it's set to a size there. So we actually need to increase the size a little. I'm going to go back to the quest board here, and I'm going to cut the button. I'm going to add a size box, and I'll paste inside of the size box. And the size box just lets us specify widths and heights what we need. So I'm just going to say a minimum desired width and height we will set to 150 by 200. And if we come to the top where it says full screen click desired, you'll see it'll shrink down. So that looks like a nice bit of paper. You'll notice on games like The Witcher, you'll have different size papers. Just create different buttons or create some randomized function to make it work. But you'll see as I compile and save and go back in, it's now 200 now. So that does look a little bit small on the grand scheme of the board. So I am going to come back in and I'll just up that to say 250 by 350. There we go. So we now have that there. You will notice we can't place this in random locations. It's pretty much set. So what I am going to do is actually right click the OL quest buttons, place with, and I will choose canvas panel like so. So I'll rename this to CP just so we know what it is. I'll make it full screen. That's all good. And on the button, you can see it's now shrunk down, which is fine. So I'll just click size to content and you can see we'll be able to randomly place it wherever we want and link it to the quests just like. So what do we need to start doing now is the first thing we need to render the quest. So when we spawn the UI, we need to take over the player and tell the widgets, here's the quest you need to spawn. Then we need to actually spawn these widget buttons on here. And then when you click a widget button, it does the same logic. It starts the quest, it quits it. Okay, so let's start from basic one. Let's actually show this UI. So I'm going to come back to my quest board here and I'm actually just going to make a child copy of it. So I'll do create child blueprint class. But this one I will call UI on the end of it and I'll open it. I'll then close down all of this just so we don't get confused. There we are. So on here we need to do a few overrides. So the first thing is we still need the arrows here, but what we can do is we can come in and we can delete these off here. We can actually override add quest and take quest, and then we can do different things with it. So with the original one, when we add a quest, we get a random location, then we spawn our paper quest here, which is fine, but we don't actually need to spawn the paper quest because we just need to spawn an empty plane and remove the empty plane. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all this code here. I'm going to come over to the UI version and I'll paste it to the add quest here, and it'll get a random location. It'll do what it needs to, but instead of spawning the button, what I'm actually going to do is create a child blueprint of this one here, and I'll call it UI version. I'll open it up, and you'll notice we won't be able to take off the interactable one. So in my case, if you want both, I'm actually going to reverse it over. So this UI one will actually be the interactable one, and this quest paper one here, I'm actually going to cut the interactable and compile and save, but then I'm going to go back to the interactable one and I'm going to add it in like so. Because then this way, the standard one will have no functionality at all. It just exists. But the child one has the interactability. And of course, if you're doing the UI version or not doing the UI version, you might not need to do any of this, but I might want both. And now we'll come back to the original quest board where we have the interactable, and I'll change this to be quest paper interactable. And on the UI version, I will keep this as the standard non-interactable. We can keep the same take quest because it goes over the keys, it finds the paper, it removes it. That's all good. That's all fine. Because we've made it a child class on the map, it will still allow us to enter it in, which is perfect. So the only difference now though is on the quest board UI, we do actually need to interact with the quest board. So I'm going to come and click the box. I'm going to make sure the collision is actually okay on the UI board. So it's currently set to block all, which is perfect. And the key thing we need for my interaction plugin at least is that the visibility trace is set to block, which it is for this one. And then we're going to go and create a new interactable to interact with the notice board. Again, if you're using your own interactable, such as the one I showed you how to make, then you just add the interface to this quest board instead of the papers. Whereas if you have your own one, make sure you just plug it into this quest. So I'm going to come over to my narrative interactions, right click blueprint class, and I'll search for interactable component, and I will call it interactable quest board. I'll open this up. So I'll come and override the on interact event here. So this is when we've walked up to the board and we've said we want to interact with it. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to freeze the player. Here's the first thing. I will right click and do get player controller, and then I'm simply going to drag off and do input mode UI only. If you've got the Borderlands style one where you want to still move around, don't do input mode only. You can just use a line trace from your camera. But in my case, I'm interacting, I'm taking over. If you're also using Common UI, use open menu instead. I've not fully grasped Common UI enough to put it in tutorials yet, but we will one day in the future. So that'll basically stop the player from being able to move around, which is perfect. The next thing we'll do is show the cursor. So I'll do set show mouse cursor and I'll tick it as true. And then we can actually create the UI. So I'm going to drag off and I'm going to do create widget like so. It'll say what class do you want to do. So I want to do the quest board UI like so. The owning player, I will plug in into the player controller, and then I'll simply drag off of this and do add to viewport. So you'll notice we've not got actually anywhere where we can pass in the quests that we need to use for this, because we need to be able to pass all of the quests in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the widget blueprint quest board UI here, and I'll go to graph, and in the variables up here, I'm going to add a new variable called quests, and I'm going to set it to my quest from narrative in my case, but you can use whatever you want. So I'll do soft class reference, I'll open it up, and I'm going to make sure that I tick it as an array like so. And then the other key thing is I'm going to make sure I tick expose on spawn like so. And all this does is when you hit compile and save and go back into your interactable, if you right click the widget and do refresh, it will ask us to pass in quests we need, which is perfect. So now I can do right click get owner to get the quest board in this case, and then we need a way to get all of the quests available on the actual quest board here, which is stored inside our quest papers. So we need a way to get all of the quest papers, which we don't currently have yet. I'm going to come and open the BPI quest board. I'm going to add a new function called get all quests, and it's going to output just an output of quests, and I will set it again to the quest of soft class. So if you've got other data you want to pass along, consider making a struct, but for now this one's fine. Then back on our quest board, we don't actually need to do anything on the standard quest board, but we do need to do it on the UI, and it's okay if you don't implement it because it won't matter. So I can come and double click on get all quests, and it's only asking for one. So what we've missed is I need to come and click an array like so, and I can hit compile, and so we need to pass it an array of quests here. So how do we get the quests? So we can right click and do get quest papers because it already exists on the board. Then I can drag off here and I can do get keys just like we did before. I can plug it into this one up here and drag this across, and then from here I can drag off of this one and do for each, and then finally we can do quest papers find, and we can plug in the key to it so we can find all the values, and then dragging off the quest, the actual assigned quest paper. If it's valid, then it means it's found a quest actually spawned on it. So now that we've got the actual quest, we need to actually start making an array of all the quests that this board has so we can return it here. So what I'm going to do is actually just promote this to a local variable called found quests, and I'm just going to keep it returning, plug that into completed for later, and then I'm going to drag found quests up here as a local variable, drag off and do add, and it'll say give me a quest, which will be from our quest board. And you'll notice we can't actually connect anything to the quest at the moment because we don't have the quest. The only one that has the quest is our interactable on our paper, but the paper we're going to be using is the plain paper, which doesn't have the interactable. So how do we give it a quest? So I'm going to come into my base class here for my quest paper, and I'm going to click the plus and add a quest property, and I'll just set it to a type of the soft class again for my quest, and I'll hit compile and save. So now we can assign the quest there. We do need to modify the interface so we can actually retrieve said quest. So I'm going to open it up and I will add a new function here called get quest, and I will simply output the quest. I'll hit compile and save. And now when we go back to our basic quest board here, we can override the get quest where we simply return quest. I'm going to make sure I set it to a soft class reference, compile and save, and I can now simply return it like. And now with this done, it means we can come back to our quest board UI, and now we can drag off of this and we can simply call the interface of get quest, which you will see there, get quest board paper, get quest as the message, plug it in to the is valid and plug it into there like that. So now when this get all quest function runs on our board, it will loop over all the quest papers we've spawned, it will find all the keys. If it's got a quest assigned to it, it will get the quest and then add it to our array. Once it's done, it will return all the quests there like so, which is perfect because then we can go back to our interactable quest board. From the owner, we can simply drag off and do get all quests from the quest board, plug it in up here, and then we can plug the output of the quests to our widget. Now I can hit compile and save. So that's the first part we've done. Now what's needed is to actually use this interactable. So I'm going to go back to my BP quest board UI. I will add the quest board interactable like so, and we'll just rename it to view quest board, view board, and it'll hit compile and so let's test it at the moment. At the moment, it fully works. We've not done the paper spawning side yet, but it should give us a good example. Now we've got two quest boards here, one rotated 90. We'll just get rid of that one because we know it's all good. Then I will come into the MISC folder. I will find the quest board with the UI, and I'll just drop it here. And you'll see overall it should function the exact same. The only key difference is you'll be able to click on the actual quest papers. When we click on it, it will show the UI and freeze our player so we can start using it. And now see, as we come in, you can see the two quest boards. This one doesn't do anything. This one lets us view the board, but we've got nothing on there at the moment. If I click U, both of them spawn. This one lets me begin the quest that way. This one does nothing, but I can click E, and then you can see the quest board has now popped up. I can't move around or do anything, but this is where we'll start be able to click the button to activate the quest Witcher style. One slight bug that I did find, if we jump back to the base quest paper here, just make sure the plane has 0 collision on it, otherwise it might mess up with the actual quest board. So I'll click no collision, no, and untick it, hit compile and save, and then just make sure back on the original Quest 1, if you are using both, that you do keep collision enabled like so. So that should make the UI one not interact with the line trace, but the actual interactable one means it can be interacted. So now that we've done that on our quest board widget here, we should now successfully have our quests populated. So let's start spawning it to the board. I'm going to drag in the quests here and drag off and do 4 each, so we can loop over all the quests we've got. So then we need to start thinking how we want this to spawn. We don't have target points on here, and it did work very well for the previous one, so I'm thinking we'll do it again. So we're going to move this into position, and I'm going to come and change the angle, rotate it a little bit, just more UI like so. Then I'll duplicate this button a bunch, but I'll make sure it's the same amount as the board here, otherwise it'll mess up, because if you've got 5 points here but 10 points on your UI, you're never going to be able to use them because the board controls it. So I'll drag these across, and you can start to have some real fun with this one and properly place them wherever you want to. You could even re-shrink it and scale it and do basically anything you want, like so. There we go, there's my notice boards placed. So now that we've got this, we need to actually assign a quest to all of these, and when we click on them, then we need to action the quest and give control back to the player. I'm going to make sure that the CP quest buttons is ticked as a variable so we can use it. I'm going to come back to the graph. I'm then going to drag off this CP quest buttons here, and I'm going to drag off and do get all children, and then do a for each loop off of this. This will basically get us all of those buttons that are inside this canvas panel, and then we need a way here to bind to the button clip. So from here, I'm going to drag off the array element, and I'll just cast to the button that we've got, our quest board button. It's already loaded in memory anyway because we've dragged it straight out, so we're not really taking up any more space with that. We actually need a way now of saying when we click this button to activate the quest and do whatever you need to do. So what I'm going to do is come back over to our button here, and I'm going to store a copy of the quest on the actual button, and I'll set it to a type of quest soft class like so. Then we don't need any of these functions here, but what I am going to do is add in an event dispatcher called onClicked, and then I will return the actual quest as a soft class like so, and then I will click the button and I will add the onClicked event here. So this onClicked is when we click the button, but then when we actually click the button, it will call our delegate, our event dispatcher called onClicked, where we will return the actual quest like so. So the reason we're doing this is back on our quest board UI here, we can now bind to our event onClicked, which is our event dispatcher here, and it's returning the quest we need to activate, meaning it's all tied in nicely. So from here, we need to do the same thing we did on the interaction. So if I come and find our interactable that we did earlier, this is what we basically need to do. We need to async load it, we then need to begin the component, and then we can get the owning board, get the paper quest, and take the quest. So we won't be able to do this entirely, but we can do a majority of it. I'll come back to the button, and I'll just paste this at the end here. I'll come back to our quest board UI, and I'll paste this after this bit here. It will say which quest do you want, so we know we want to add this quest here, and we can drag it down there as well. So it'll start loading it. You can show a loading symbol if you want, or if you're expecting it to be slow. It'll begin the quest, it'll then get the owning board, and it'll try to get the paper quest, which is something we can't do because we don't actually know what the paper quest is yet, and we can't actually do get the owning board either because we don't know that either yet. So what I'm actually going to do instead is I'm going to add a variable here called owning board, and I'm going to set it to a type of VPI quest board, like so. I'll make sure it's not an array, and I'll make sure it's ticked as expose on spawn and instance editable. So what this means now is when we spawn this UI from our interactable here, if we right click refresh, we can actually tell it the owning board here. So we can just drag off get owner, and we can do the same trick we did earlier with the actual paper. So if I come back to the quest board here and find the interface for it, VPI quest board, we can actually add a function in here called get quest board, where it'll return an output of our quest board. I'll set it to a single. It'll be our BPI quest board, so it'll return almost itself, which is perfect for what we need. Now that we've done that, if we come back to our quest board and implement this interface, from here we can just drag self into it because it already inherits from it. And on the interactable quest board from get owner, because we know this is actually on the quest board, we can now drag off and do get quest board from our BPI quest board, not the paper. And now if we plug this in here, we can now plug this quest board into it so we can tell the UI which quest board it belongs to. And now because we can tell it which quest board it belongs to, we can come back to our UI here, drag our owning board in, and now we just need to simply find the paper which contains this quest. So I'm going to come back to the interface one more time, and we can't use the get all quests function. That simply returns all the quests, and we can't use take quest because we need to provide the paper. So let's join it together. So I'm actually going to click on the function here, and I will do bind quest paper, and then the input will be the quest that we want to find on it, and then the output will be our quest paper, BPI quest paper. We'll use the base class because then we can do other things with it later. And now what this means is we go back to the quest board and implement find quest paper, we can now loop over all of the quest papers we have. So we'll get the keys for each over it, and then from the quest papers we'll drag off and we'll do find again. Then from this find we actually just need to check if it's valid, just in case it doesn't exist or we haven't connected anything to the current key. Then from the find we're going to drag off and we're going to get our quest that we've just added. From here we're going to drag off and do a double equals, and then connecting this we're going to drag in the quest from the beginning here. So as a shortcut we can just drag off and do get quest like so. From here we're going to add it to a branch and just connect it up like so, and only if we've found the correct quest paper on true then we can connect it to the find element like so. If it's false, just leave it because it'll come back and search the for each loop. If it's not valid, it'll search the for each loop, but on completed just make sure you return an empty quest paper to say we can't find it for some reason. And now with that we can jump back to our UI here and we can drag off the owning board and do find quest paper, which will give us the paper we need. The quest we want is the one up here, so we can plug it into there, and then finally we can plug the quest paper into take quest, where it'll pick the paper up, remove it from it. We do need to connect owning board to it so it knows where to go. Then the only other exception is we can just remove from parent, where we remove the UI so we no longer have access to it. But at the moment we're not giving the player control back, and that's what we'll do in take quest. So I'll go back to quest board UI, event graph. We've already overridden what add quest does, but we want the take quest to essentially do the exact same thing, because if you remember, all it does is remove the paper from the screen, but we need to give control back as well. So what I'm actually going to do is right click this take quest and do add call to parent function, and I'll drag this across. I'll connect this up like so, and this will basically tell it I'm overriding you, do your default code first and then do what we need. And in my case what we need is to get the player controller. We need to drag off and we need to do set input mode game only. If you're using a top down game, don't use game only, you will remove your mouse cursor, simply use UI and game. And then finally I will do set show mouse cursor, where I'll untick. If you're using a mouse cursor based game, don't untick it. So the only other thing we need to do before we test it is, at the moment we're looping over all the buttons and giving it a quest. But what if we don't have a quest? We need to do something about it. What I'm going to do is just drag all this on click event over a little bit, and I'm going to drag in quests. So I'm going to drag off of the quest and do a get and do a is valid index, and I'm going to plug it in to the index of the array loop here. So this is going to count up 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for all the children in here. If we've got 5 children, it will go 0, 1, 2, 3, 5. We're going to go to our quests and go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's going to tell us if that is a valid location on that array. If we have one quest in here and we ask for number 2, this is going to tell us, sorry, there's no quest, which is perfect. So if it's true, meaning it is a valid index, I'm going to drag off of quest and do get like so, and plug the index into it. And from this quest board button here, I'm going to do set quest like so, and I'm going to plug in the quest, plug it into the true, and plug it into the on click event. So it's all good. It does what it needs to. It assigns the quest to it. What if it isn't valid? In that case, I'm going to drag off the quest board button and do set visibility and just set it to collapse. Plug it in up here like so to false. So for each quest it can find, if it's got 3 quests, it'll go through 3 buttons and assign the quest to it. If it's not, it'll assign the quest to it and bind the click event. If it's not got it, it'll just make it invisible. Let's hit compile and save, and let's give it a try. And now you can see both quest boards are there. I'll press U and they appear perfectly. I can come and interact with that one, or I can view the board. So let's view the board. We can see we've got a quest here. There's nothing on it. Like I say, add text, do whatever you need to. Click it and nothing happens. So oddly, nothing has generally happened. So let's try to debug it then. Normally, I would cut this part out, but I think it would be good to show you how to debug more. If you learn to debug, you can really get past a lot of basic errors. So let's see. So we clicked the button here, and for some reason, it's not told us that we've done anything. Now the UI does disappear, which makes me suggest it's found everything it needs, but this begin quest isn't working. And I have a feeling that the quest class on here, when it's asynchronously loading, is losing reference to this quest here. So what I will do is click on this begin quest and press the F9 key to add a breakpoint there. Now if we come back and run it, when we press F9, it breakpoints the code, meaning it stops execution. It pauses it, so we can look in the blueprints and see what's happening. So you see, if I come back, press U to show board. If I press E on here, it shows up. Nothing happens. If I click this, it now breakpoints in the code. As you can see, we can see what's going off. So let's start probing to see what's happening. So I'm going to hover over quest and see we've got no quest log. For some reason, it's not assigning a quest, but we assign it up here. And we have got one quest. No, we don't. So when we hover over quest, you should see it gives us one quest, but it's got nothing in it. Well, that's very odd. So let's unbreakpoint that with F9 and click stop. So why are we not getting any quests when we pass it into here? Because we should be getting quests. So where do we spawn the UI? It's on interactive quest board. So we come in here and call get all quests on the owner of the quest board here. So let's go to the quest board UI. We have got get all quests there, and it is implemented. So we get the quest papers, we'll loop over all the keys. So we have implemented get all quests, and we do loop over everything. But I think it's to get quest here, which isn't actually getting the quest. So let's go back to our quest board UI event graph. Where we create it here, are we actually passing in the quest? We're not setting the quest here. So I'm going to come back to the quest board paper here. I'm going to click the quest, and I'm going to just make sure that we tick expose on spawn, because we're not populating the quest variable. So it's not marked as instance editable. Make sure it's in well, compile, save. And back on the quest board, now you will see when we refresh the spawn actor here, it will say give us a quest, which is perfect. So I can drag in the quest we're adding into it like so. Compile and save. And we'll also have to do this on the add one here, because we're doing the same thing for the UI. There we go. Compile and save. So now let's give it another try, now that we've actually given it the quest that we've done. So now that we have our quest board done, we should be able to test it nice and easily. So now you can see we have our two quest boards. If I press the U key, the quest is added to both of them, and you can see when I walk up, it says it wants me to view the board. If I press E, we can now see the quest board. I haven't added any hover effects to buttons or anything. That is something you can easily expand, and as soon as I click the quest, it disappears, and we now get the quest started. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. So that is our quest board two-parter series wrapped up. You now have a quest board where you can walk up and accept individual quests, and you can even use dialogue wherever he's run off to. That one, follow me, and then he'll give us a quest. So you can see the boards have now been added with a quest because he added it. We also have the view board where we can come and accept the quest. So there is so much more you could expand upon this. You could link quest boards together, you could improve the UI, you could do all sorts to it. If there is anything else you would like me to see do to these quest boards, please let me know in the comments. My name is Decryption, and I will see you next time.